It was Christmas Eve, and the city was alive with holiday cheer. Streets lined with sparkling lights, decorations everywhere, and the scent of hot cocoa drifting through the air. Inside a grand ballroom, the richest and most influential people of the city mingled, enjoying a night of luxury. Among them stood Gregory Ashton, a man who seemed to have everything anyone could ever want: wealth, power, and influence. But as he walked through the crowded gala, his face remained unchanged, cold even, as he scanned the room. Gregory had always been a man of business, focused solely on making money and climbing to the top. He had built his empire from the ground up, but somewhere along the way, he had lost something important: his happiness. Money and success had made him rich, but they had also isolated him. The people he surrounded himself with were either business associates or people who admired his wealth, but none of them truly knew him. As the evening wore on, Gregory found himself standing near the edge of the room, watching the party go on without him. He picked up a glass of champagne, swirling it absent-mindedly as he stared at the glimmering lights that filled the room. He had been attending parties like this for years, but tonight, he felt disconnected. The laughter around him seemed hollow, the conversations too shallow. His eyes wandered to the windows, where the cold winter night greeted him. But there was something else that caught his attention. In the far corner of the room, away from the music and the chatter, Gregory noticed a small figure sitting alone on a bench. The child couldn't have been older than 8 or 9, and yet here he was, sitting by himself in the middle of the grandest party of the year. The boy had messy brown hair, and his coat, though warm-looking, seemed too big for his small frame. His face was pale, his eyes tired, and he wasn't smiling. He was staring down at something in his hands, completely absorbed in it. Gregory frowned, his curiosity piqued. What was a child doing here, alone, without any adult supervision? It wasn't right. The child should be surrounded by family, friends, or at least someone to talk to. Instead, he seemed lost in his own world. Without thinking, Gregory made his way over to him. As he walked, the noise of the party seemed to fade. All he could hear was the soft shuffle of his shoes against the polished floor and the soft murmur of voices in the distance. Gregory reached the bench and paused for a moment, studying the boy's face. The child didn't look up when he approached, nor did he make any move to acknowledge him. "Are you all right?" Gregory asked gently, not wanting to startle the boy. The child looked up slowly, his eyes red and tired. He didn't seem surprised that Gregory was speaking to him, though the look in his eyes suggested that he didn't expect much comfort from anyone. He held the photo tightly in his hands, as if afraid someone would take it away from him. For a moment, the room seemed to disappear, and Gregory was left standing there, wondering what had made this young child so distant and sorrowful. The boy's voice was soft when he finally spoke, almost a whisper. "It's my mom," he said, his gaze falling back to the photo. "This is the first Christmas without her." Gregory's heart sank. The child's words were simple, but they carried a weight that Gregory couldn't ignore. The boy's mother had passed away, and this was the first holiday without her. Gregory didn't know what to say. He had always been so focused on his own life and career, never really taking the time to understand what it meant to lose someone you loved. He had seen plenty of people grieve in his line of work, but he had never felt the depth of pain that a child must feel when they lose a parent. "I'm sorry," Gregory said after a moment, his voice quieter now. He glanced at the photo the boy was holding. It was a picture of a woman, smiling brightly. She looked kind and warm, her eyes full of life. Gregory imagined she must have been a wonderful mother, someone who could make her son feel safe and loved. "I miss her," the boy said, his voice shaking just slightly. "She used to tell me that Christmas was magic. That the whole world would be full of light and happiness. But it doesn't feel like that anymore. It's just empty." Gregory's chest tightened as he looked at the boy, who had now lowered his head, staring at the photo in his hands. Gregory didn't know what to do. He had never been good with emotions, especially not the raw, painful kind that children felt. He was used to making decisions, managing companies, solving problems with logic. But here, there was no formula to fix the boy's pain. Gregory felt helpless for the first time in a long while. He didn't know what drove him to do it, but before he could stop himself, he sat down beside the boy on the bench. The child looked up in surprise but didn't pull away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, and the sounds of the party seemed to grow faint in the background. Gregory stared at the child, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. The boy's sadness was contagious, but in a way, it opened something in Gregory's heart. He had always prided himself on being strong, on being able to handle anything. But now, looking at this child, he realized that strength wasn't always about success or money. Sometimes, it was about reaching out to others in their most vulnerable moments. What was her name? Gregory asked softly, breaking the silence. Emily, the boy replied. She was the best mom. She always made everything better. Gregory could see the tears welling up in the boy's eyes. He wanted to comfort him, but words seemed so small compared to the pain the boy was feeling. Instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, offering a small gesture of support. For a moment, they sat there together, surrounded by the luxury and noise of the gala, but in their small corner, it was just the two of them, united in their shared quietness. Gregory felt a strange warmth spreading through him. He didn't know why, but he was determined to do something for this boy. Something that would help him feel better, even if just for a moment. As the minutes passed, Gregory promised himself that he wouldn't just walk away like he had with so many other things in his life. He had the resources, the influence, and for the first time, he had the desire to do more than just provide money. He wanted to make a difference in this boy's life, even if it was just on this one lonely Christmas Eve. The moments passed in silence, with Gregory still sitting next to Jamie, both of them lost in their thoughts. Jamie continued to hold the photo of his mother in his hands, his small fingers gently tracing the edges. Gregory watched the boy, unsure of what to say next. He didn't want to say something that might make things worse, and yet he couldn't just sit there and do nothing. After a long pause, Jamie spoke again, his voice barely a whisper, as if speaking any louder might shatter the fragile moment. She used to tell me that Christmas was a time for magic, he said, his eyes still fixed on the photo. She said that when you believe in the magic of Christmas, anything can happen. But it doesn't feel like that now. Everything feels broken. Gregory didn't know how to respond. What could he say to a child who had lost everything, especially during a time that was supposed to be filled with joy and togetherness? He had never experienced such a loss himself, and though he had seen grief in others, it was different when you were looking into the eyes of a child who was clearly struggling to understand why their world had changed so suddenly. The weight of the boy's sadness settled over him like a heavy fog. Gregory wanted to do something for him. He wanted to give Jamie the one thing he was missing, a sense of hope. But how could he, someone who had built an empire by taking control of everything, give something intangible like hope? How could he offer a grieving child something that didn't come with a price tag or a deal? Without thinking, Gregory gently placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder. "I'm sorry you're feeling this way," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Christmas should never feel like this." Jamie looked up at him, his eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to feel sad anymore," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I just want my mom back. I don't know what to do." Gregory felt a pang in his chest. The boy's pain was raw, and it hurt him to see such sorrow in someone so young. It reminded him of the emptiness he sometimes felt in his own life despite his wealth, despite his success. There were days when he felt disconnected from the world, unsure of his place in it. But this was different. It wasn't about him. It was about Jamie, a child who had lost the one person who had given him love and care. Gregory was used to fixing problems, solving challenges with his vast resources. But this was different. He couldn't fix the past, and he couldn't bring Jamie's mother back. All he could do was offer what little comfort he could, even if it didn't seem like much. "I know this must be hard for you," Gregory said, trying to find the right words. "And I know it's not the same, but I want you to know that you're not alone. You don't have to face this alone." Jamie wiped at his eyes, sniffing quietly. "I don't know anyone else who's alone like me," he said, his voice small. "Everyone else has someone. But I don't. It's just me now." Gregory could feel the deep sadness in Jamie's words. His heart ached for the boy, and he wanted to say something to make it better, to give Jamie the feeling of being loved and cared for, even though the boy's mother was no longer there. But he knew words alone weren't enough. Words weren't going to make the pain go away. So, Gregory sat with him in silence. He stayed by his side, not rushing to fill the quiet with empty phrases. Sometimes, the best thing you could do for someone was to simply be there, to sit with them in their grief and offer a silent kind of support. Gregory wasn't sure how much comfort that would bring, but he hoped it would help. He hoped that maybe, just maybe, this boy could feel a little less alone in this huge world. After what felt like an eternity, Jamie finally looked up at him, a small, uncertain smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Thank you for sitting with me," he said quietly. "It feels a little less lonely now." Gregory nodded. "You're welcome," he said, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the fancy food or the sparkling decorations of the gala around him. It was a warmth that came from being present for someone, from offering a moment of comfort when it was needed most. As the minutes ticked by, Gregory thought about how, just a few hours ago, he had been surrounded by people at the party, all of them pretending to have a good time, to be happy. But in the midst of all the glitz and glamour, Gregory had felt more alone than ever. He had everything money could buy, yet it felt hollow. And here, with Jamie, he realized that true connection wasn't about wealth or status, it was about offering your time, your attention, and your heart when it mattered. Gregory didn't know what to do next, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to just walk away from this. This wasn't some passing moment. Jamie needed someone, and Gregory realized that he could be that someone, even if just for tonight. He didn't have the answers, but maybe he didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe what mattered was showing up, offering the boy what little light he had left to give. The sounds of the party continued to echo through the hall, but Gregory didn't pay attention to them anymore. He was no longer lost in the endless parade of champagne glasses and fleeting conversations. His focus was entirely on Jamie, the boy who had opened up to him in ways Gregory didn't expect. Jamie looked at him again, his face softening. "Do you think it will ever feel like Christmas again?" he asked, his voice full of hope, even though it was tinged with doubt. Gregory didn't know how to answer. He wasn't sure if it would ever feel like Christmas for Jamie again, not in the way it once had. But what he did know was that, even in the midst of grief, there was always room for hope, no matter how small. "Maybe not today," Gregory said, his voice quiet but firm. "But one day, when you're ready, Christmas will feel different again. And until then, you're not alone." Jamie seemed to consider this for a moment. Slowly, he nodded, as though the words were settling in. Gregory wasn't sure if he fully believed them either, but in that moment, they both shared something important: the hope that things could get better, even when they seemed impossible. And for Gregory, that was enough for now. The days following that quiet moment on Christmas Eve seemed to blur together for Gregory. He had left the gala feeling more conflicted than ever. The image of Jamie, sitting so quietly with his mother's photo, haunted him. Gregory couldn't stop thinking about what the boy had said about Christmas feeling broken, about wanting his mother back. It was a reminder of something Gregory had long since buried deep within himself. A sense of loss, a sense of longing. Even with all his wealth and success, he was often left feeling empty, like something was always missing. The next morning, Gregory woke up to a world that felt as cold as the winter outside his mansion's windows. The holiday decorations, the glittering lights, the cheerful music, it all seemed distant, irrelevant. He couldn't get Jamie out of his mind. The boy's sadness had touched him in a way nothing else ever had. Gregory had everything anyone could ever want, but he lacked what really mattered: the ability to connect with others on a deep, personal level. He realized now that it wasn't enough just to give money or gifts. What Jamie needed wasn't something Gregory could buy. What Jamie needed was something he had never really learned to give: compassion, care, and the feeling of being truly seen. As he sipped his coffee, staring out at the snow falling outside, an idea began to form in Gregory's mind. It wasn't something he had ever considered before, but somehow it felt like the right thing to do. He couldn't bring Jamie's mother back, but maybe he could help Jamie in some other way. It was Christmas, a time for giving, for helping those in need. Gregory had always seen it as just another holiday to get through, but now he saw it differently. Now, it felt like the perfect opportunity to make a change. To do something that mattered. By midday, Gregory had made up his mind. He reached out to his assistant and instructed her to gather all the information she could about Jamie's mother. He needed to know everything: their family, her background, anything that might help him understand Jamie's world better. It wasn't just about making a grand gesture or buying an extravagant gift. Gregory wanted to do something meaningful, something that would show Jamie that he wasn't alone. Gregory spent the next few days in a whirlwind of activity. His private investigator tracked down information about Emily, Jamie's mother. They uncovered old family photos, talked to neighbors, and even found some of her favorite books. They learned that Emily had always been a kind, loving woman, someone who had put her son first, always making sure he felt safe and loved, even when times were tough. As Gregory reviewed the details, he felt a deep sense of respect for her. Emily had been a woman who valued family, love, and connection above all else. It made Gregory realize how much he had taken for granted in his own life. It wasn't long before Gregory found himself at his private office, surrounded by the research he had gathered. He thought about Jamie, sitting alone in that corner of the gala, holding onto his mother's memory. Gregory knew that nothing could bring Emily back, but maybe, just maybe, he could help Jamie feel a sense of connection again. Something that could fill the emptiness inside of him. Later that week, Gregory arranged to meet with Jamie. The boy, though still carrying the sadness of his loss, seemed a little lighter, a little more hopeful. When Gregory greeted him at his office, Jamie looked up in surprise, as if he hadn't expected anyone to care. "Hi, Jamie," Gregory said, his voice gentle. "I've been thinking about you." Jamie hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You don't have to keep checking on me," he said softly. "I'm fine." Gregory smiled, though he knew that Jamie wasn't fine. The boy was trying to be brave, but Gregory could see the hurt still in his eyes. "I know you're trying to be strong," Gregory said. "But sometimes, it's okay to let people help." Jamie looked at him, his gaze uncertain. "I don't want to be a burden." Gregory shook his head. "You're not a burden, Jamie. No one is. And you shouldn't have to go through this alone." Jamie's expression softened, and for the first time, Gregory saw a glimmer of something like trust in his eyes. It was a small thing, but it was enough. Gregory could tell that Jamie needed to hear those words, that he wasn't a burden, that he was worthy of help, of care. "I've been learning about your mom," Gregory continued, choosing his words carefully. "She was a wonderful woman. People who knew her spoke about how much she loved you. She did everything she could to make sure you were happy." Jamie's eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected anyone to care about his mother. "Really? Really," Gregory said, nodding. "She was amazing. And even though she's not here anymore, I want you to know that she's still with you. The love she gave you never disappears. It stays with you." Jamie was quiet for a moment, absorbing Gregory's words. He glanced down at the photo of his mother, which he had brought with him to the meeting. It was the same photo he had been holding that night at the gala, a picture of her smiling brightly, full of life. "I don't know if I can ever feel like Christmas again," Jamie said, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "It doesn't feel the same without her." Gregory felt his heart ache for the boy. He wanted to say something that would make everything better, something that would bring Jamie's mother back to life. But he knew he couldn't. What he could do, however, was help Jamie hold onto the memories. Help him find ways to remember his mom, not in sadness, but in love. "Maybe not this year," Gregory said, his voice steady. "But one day, Christmas will feel special again. It'll take time, but you'll find a way to carry her love with you, and that's the greatest gift she could ever give you." Jamie didn't say anything right away, but he looked up at Gregory, his expression a little less heavy. "Do you really think that?" "I do," Gregory said, smiling softly. "You're stronger than you know, Jamie. And you don't have to face this alone." As they spoke, Gregory realized that he wasn't just offering words of comfort to the boy. He was also offering himself. For the first time in a long while, Gregory felt the weight of what it meant to truly connect with someone. To give a piece of himself, to offer something real and meaningful. Over the next few weeks, Gregory continued to check in with Jamie, learning more about him and his life. They spent time together, talking about things that made Jamie smile, like his favorite toys, the funny memories he had of his mom, and the books he loved to read. Slowly, the boy began to open up, to trust Gregory in ways he hadn't trusted anyone else. And though Gregory knew that Jamie's pain wouldn't disappear overnight, he also knew that he had given him something important. Hope. The belief that even in the darkest times, there was still light to be found, if only you allowed yourself to see it. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with small steps of progress. Gregory found himself thinking about Jamie more and more, trying to find ways to offer him comfort. It wasn't just about making Jamie feel better for a day, Gregory wanted to help him find a way to carry the memory of his mother with him. And in the process, he discovered that it wasn't just Jamie who needed healing, it was Gregory himself. After the meeting at his office, Gregory continued to reach out to Jamie, but this time, it wasn't just for the boy's sake. Gregory found himself looking for answers too. He wasn't exactly sure what he was searching for, maybe some way to fill the emptiness inside of him, the loneliness that had been with him for as long as he could remember. But he realized that helping Jamie wasn't just a way to help the boy cope with his grief, it was a way for Gregory to start healing his own wounds. One afternoon, as the snow continued to fall outside, Gregory sat at his desk, reviewing a few reports. But his mind kept wandering back to Jamie. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy's longing to feel whole again, to find a sense of connection and peace. Gregory had always seen himself as someone who fixed problems, someone who had the answers. But this was different. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with money or influence. This was a problem that needed empathy and understanding, things Gregory wasn't used to giving. His thoughts were interrupted by a call from his assistant. She had gathered more information about Emily, Jamie's mother. This time, it wasn't just about her background or her life before Jamie, it was about the things she had left behind. Her favorite places, the activities she loved, the people who had meant the most to her. Gregory listened intently as his assistant explained that Emily had once written down some things she wanted Jamie to have one day, things she had hoped would help him feel close to her even after she was gone. Gregory's heart skipped a beat. It was a small thing, but it could mean the world to Jamie. He asked his assistant to arrange for the items to be brought to his mansion, wanting to give them to Jamie as a Christmas gift. It wasn't just a physical gift, it was a way to help Jamie feel connected to his mother in a way that might bring him comfort. When the items arrived, Gregory carefully unpacked them. There were old books that Jamie's mother had read to him when he was younger, a journal she had kept, and a small wooden box filled with little trinkets, things that had been important to her and that she had kept as keepsakes. There was also a letter, written to Jamie, though it had never been sent. The letter was a beautiful, heartfelt message from Emily, telling her son how much she loved him and how proud she was of him. She spoke about her dreams for his future, about how she wanted him to live a full, happy life, and about how she would always be with him in spirit. Gregory read the letter quietly, his heart heavy with emotion. He thought about Jamie, about how the boy must feel, reading those words knowing his mother was no longer there to tell him in person. But he also realized that the letter, in its own way, was a gift from Emily to Jamie, even after her passing. It was a reminder that love transcends time and space, that it doesn't end with death. It lasts. That evening, Gregory invited Jamie over for a special dinner. He knew the boy had been through so much already, but he wanted to offer him something different this Christmas. Something meaningful. Jamie had started to open up to him, to trust him, but Gregory knew that the pain of losing his mother wasn't something that would go away easily. When Jamie arrived, he seemed a little quieter than usual, though there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes as he walked into Gregory's home. The warmth of the house, the soft glow of the Christmas lights, and the scent of freshly baked cookies filled the air. Gregory had tried to create an atmosphere that was cozy and inviting, one that would make Jamie feel safe. "Hey, Jamie," Gregory said, smiling as he greeted him. "I have something for you." Jamie looked up, his face lighting up with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "For me?" Gregory nodded and motioned for Jamie to sit down at the table. "Yes, it's something special. I think you'll like it." Gregory handed Jamie the small wooden box first. "This belonged to your mom," Gregory explained. "She kept these things close to her heart. I thought you might like to see them." Jamie took the box in his hands, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside were small, meaningful items, pieces of jewelry, a necklace, a locket, and a few other trinkets. Jamie picked up the locket and turned it over in his hands. "This is hers," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Gregory nodded. "She kept it as a reminder of the people she loved. And now, it's yours." Jamie's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't speak. Instead, he gently placed the locket around his neck, as if doing so somehow brought him closer to his mother. It was a small gesture, but Gregory could see the significance of it. Next, Gregory handed Jamie the journal. "Your mom also kept this," he said. "She wrote in it often. I think she wanted you to have it, to help you understand how much she loved you." Jamie opened the journal carefully, as though it were fragile. As he flipped through the pages, he came across a letter. He paused and read it slowly. Gregory watched from a distance, unsure of what Jamie was feeling. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a quiet moment, filled with the weight of love, loss, and healing. Finally, Jamie closed the journal and looked up at Gregory. "Thank you," he said softly. "This means a lot to me." Gregory smiled, a warmth filling his chest. "You don't have to thank me, Jamie. Your mom left these things for you because she wanted you to remember her. To know that she's always with you, in some way." Jamie nodded, his face softening. "I think I'm starting to understand that," he said quietly. "She really loved me, didn't she?" Gregory nodded, his own throat tight. "More than you can imagine." As the evening continued, Gregory realized that this was the most meaningful Christmas he had ever experienced. Not because of the gifts or the grand gestures, but because of the connection he had formed with Jamie. It wasn't about giving material things, it was about offering comfort, offering hope, and showing up for someone who needed it. And in doing so, Gregory had found something he had been searching for without even realizing it, a sense of purpose, of connection, of being needed. As they sat together, Jamie smiling softly and clutching the locket, Gregory realized that the real magic of Christmas wasn't in the gifts or the decorations. It was in the moments of kindness, in the acts of love, and in the healing of broken hearts. Christmas morning arrived with a crispness in the air that seemed to make the world feel quieter, more peaceful. The sound of the wind brushing against the windows was soft, almost like a whisper. Inside Gregory's mansion, everything was still, save for the occasional crackling of the fireplace. It was early, and the house was filled with a quiet energy, one that felt different from the usual hustle and bustle of holiday mornings. Gregory sat at the breakfast table, a warm cup of coffee in his hands, his thoughts drifting to Jamie. He had spent the last few days reflecting on how much had changed in such a short period of time. Not just for Jamie, but for himself as well. What began as a small act of kindness, a decision to help a grieving boy, had turned into something more. It had turned into a connection that had bridged the gap between two strangers who had both felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness, though for very different reasons. For Gregory, this Christmas wasn't about the extravagant gifts or the parties. It was about the quiet moments, the moments when you truly saw someone else, when you truly understood their pain and their heart. It was about the small things, the time spent together, the words of comfort, the reassurance that no one was ever truly alone. Gregory thought back to the night he had sat with Jamie on that bench, the two of them surrounded by the noise and brightness of the gala, yet caught in their own world of shared silence. That night, Gregory had made a promise to himself. He promised that he would do everything he could to help Jamie find peace, and he realized that in doing so, he was finding his own peace too. Helping Jamie had given him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about fixing everything, it was about showing up when it mattered most. As the morning wore on, there was a knock at the door. Gregory's heart skipped a beat. It was Jamie. The boy had promised to come by after spending time with his guardian, and Gregory was eager to see him. He opened the door, and there stood Jamie, holding the small wooden box Gregory had given him. There was a lightness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a softness in his expression that told Gregory more than words ever could. "Hey, Jamie," Gregory said with a smile. "You look like you're in better spirits today." Jamie nodded, his face flushed from the cold outside. "I feel different," he said quietly. "I think I'm starting to understand things better now." Gregory stepped aside and let Jamie into the house, leading him to the warm living room where a fire crackled in the hearth. It was a comfortable space, filled with soft light and the kind of warmth that made you feel safe. They sat down together, and Gregory could see that Jamie had something on his mind. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jamie began, looking down at the wooden box in his hands. "About how my mom's love is still with me. And I think I believe it now. I think I feel it." Gregory's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just the words themselves that made him feel proud, it was the fact that Jamie was beginning to find his own way through his grief. He was finding hope in the things his mother had left behind, in the memories that still held so much meaning. "I'm glad to hear that, Jamie," Gregory said softly. "Your mom loved you very much. And even though she's not here, that love will always be a part of you." Jamie nodded, and for the first time, Gregory saw a smile, a real smile on his face. It was a small thing, but it was a sign of progress. Jamie was starting to let go of some of the heavy sadness he had been carrying around. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. And that, Gregory realized, was all that mattered. "Can I show you something?" Jamie asked, his voice filled with quiet excitement. "Of course," Gregory said, intrigued. Jamie opened the box and pulled out the locket that had once belonged to his mother. He held it up for Gregory to see, and there, inside the locket, was a small photograph of Emily. Gregory hadn't seen the photo before, and he was struck by how young and vibrant Emily looked, her eyes full of life. "This is the picture she always kept close," Jamie said, his voice barely a whisper. "She told me it was a reminder that no matter where I was, she would always be with me. I think I understand that now." Gregory looked at the locket and then at Jamie. The boy's eyes were full of determination, as if he had made peace with the fact that his mother was no longer physically with him. But her love, the love that had been passed down through the years, would never leave him. It was a bond that even death could not break. "That's a beautiful way to remember her," Gregory said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're holding on to her love, and that's something no one can take from you." Jamie smiled again, this time with more confidence. "I think I'm going to be okay," he said. "I think I can still carry her with me, even though she's gone." Gregory smiled back, feeling a wave of pride for the boy who had shown so much strength. It wasn't just about surviving the holidays or finding ways to fill the empty spaces in his heart. It was about embracing the love and memories that remained, and finding the courage to move forward. "I know you will, Jamie," Gregory said, his voice filled with warmth. "And I'll be here for you, too. You're not alone in this. Not now, not ever." For a long moment, they sat there together, the crackling fire filling the silence. It was a comfortable silence, one that spoke of understanding and connection. Gregory had never been one to embrace such moments before, but now, in this quiet room with Jamie, he realized that sometimes the most important things were the unspoken ones, the shared moments of companionship, the feeling of being seen, and the knowledge that you didn't have to face the world alone. Later that afternoon, they stood by the window, watching the snow fall outside. Jamie had his locket in his hand, and Gregory stood beside him, feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't known in a long time. The world outside was cold, but inside, it was warm with the light of understanding. "Do you think it will always feel this way?" Jamie asked, his voice hopeful. Gregory thought for a moment, his eyes drifting to the snow-covered landscape outside. "Maybe not always," he said, his voice soft but certain. "But I think you'll find that, in time, it'll feel more like Christmas again. You'll remember the good times with your mom, and you'll carry her love with you every day." Jamie smiled up at him, his face shining with a quiet strength. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." Gregory placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to thank me, Jamie. I'm just glad I could be here for you. And I always will be." As the two of them stood together, watching the snow fall outside, Gregory knew that this Christmas had changed both of them. It wasn't just about gifts or grand gestures, it was about the moments of connection, of understanding, and of love that lasted beyond words. And in that moment, Gregory realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the true magic of Christmas.